Focused on cyber resilience for businesses as part of the Chamber's AI Advantage series. We came into this year thinking about the Chamber's role in AI and reached out to our friends at Comcast and talked about it. And really, what we are able to do is bring people together to talk about issues of common interest and how AI is being embraced and adopted throughout the business community in so many ways. We've had, this is, I don't know, the fifth or sixth of these sessions in which we've talked about, generally speaking, how businesses are embracing AI and applying it. We talked about the ethics and legal issues associated with AI. We talked about applications of AI and in the healthcare and medical community. So it's been really a great series for us, and we'll probably continue it next year to just continue with this journey of understanding what is this thing AI? How can it be helpful to us? We did some surveying of the business community, and while there's many times that people are applying it in certain ways, by far, what people want is to learn what others are doing, and there's not a complete understanding of all of the tools that people can use. So as artificial intelligence continues to reshape the way we live, the way we work, and protect our digital infrastructure, it's really never been more important for business leaders to understand both the promise and the peril of technology. This event will explore how organizations can proactively protect their operations, customers, and reputations in an increasingly complex digital world. So let me begin by thanking the team at Comcast for their generous sponsorship that enabled us to have this series, have this event today that's free and open, and that we're able to offer both in person and virtually to an online audience. So now let's turn to the panelists. We're happen to be joined. I tapped into my board of directors, which is a great group of people. We're honored to be joined by two exceptional leaders who are at the forefront of this transformation. As I say, if you want to know something about a subject matter, talk to people who wake up every day thinking about it, and you'll learn a lot. Let me start by introducing someone whose work exemplifies the intersection of innovation and resilience. Sean Adamson, Senior Vice President of Comcast Business Northeast Division. Sean oversees operations across 14 states and the District of Columbia, spanning from Maine to Virginia. In this role, Sean's responsible for driving growth in Comcast Business, small businesses, mid-market, enterprise segments, fostering key client relationships, and executing strategic initiatives. Sean has a tremendous background, deep expertise in helping businesses stay connected, secure, and future-ready, with over 25 years of experience in the telecommunications industry. Sean has spent 12 years with Comcast Business in various leadership roles. Please join me in welcoming Sean Adamson. Next, I'll introduce Corey Thomas, Chief Executive Officer of Rapid7, a leading global cybersecurity company, who also happens to serve as the chair of the Chamber Board of Directors, which gives me the privilege, when I open the email that I shouldn't have opened, of calling my board chair and say, Corey, what do I do now? By the way, true story. Corey's recognized as an international expert in technology and business. He's been recognized through his appointments to the National Security Telecommunications Advisory Committee and the Council of Foreign Relations, as well as the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston. Corey contributes cross-industry leadership to the board of directors of LPL Financial and Vanderbilt University, and currently chairs the Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts Board, and as I mentioned, the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce Board. He's an active champion of the technology community, but Corey in his spare time is an angel investor providing guidance to companies navigating technology transformation. So please join me in welcoming Corey. And now I'll turn it over to both Corey and Sean to join us. And okay.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah.
So thank you. It's great to be here and be part of the series and the events. And I actually just hit my 1-year anniversary on the board of the Boston, Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce. So I get to work with Jim and Corey, which is fantastic. And it's been awesome, actually, just a great group of business leaders, coming together. So that's been fantastic. And like Jim said, this whole series came out of obviously the chamber wanting to continue to serve the business community and us wanting to be a good partner in that and serve the business community. And AI seems like a very timely topic for a bunch of conversations. And so happy to be here and be part of it in person today. And then also this topic of like cybersecurity and cyber resilience. And my daughter did what you did with the email just like the other day, and she's a college graduate. She knows not to click anything, but we were able to get her repaired as well. So, so it happens, right? It happens all the time. In fact, we just released our annual report. Comcast Business publishes an annual cybersecurity threat report, and we analyze the impact of 34 billion cyber events with a B. So, including Jim, they're happening. They're happening all the time. They're happening all the time. But we're really proud of this report. So I'd encourage everybody. It's available for free. You can download a copy on the Comcast Business website. Or just search for Comcast Business Cybersecurity Threat Report. But basically using our advanced data fabric and proprietary analysis tools internally developed, the report provides valuable insights for protecting what matters most: small businesses, global enterprises, protecting business. And then Corey and I are going to have, I think, a nice chat about it today as well. But did want to just get that out there, that comes out because we're quite proud of it. Let's go deep, Corey. Let's go deep on cybersecurity. Corey already said that I could have a little bit of fun. I think he said that.
Yes, I did.
So first of all, is it true that as long as the summer weather keeps extending here, your wife has given you permission to wear colored blazers?
She had. But she did like check the temperature, and she's just like, "Hey, this is probably your last day." She's just like, "I hope you have a couple more, but this is probably it. So get it out your system."
And you're in all black and blue.
And then
right?
I have to do the black. I have the row of blue ones in the closet, and they're like slightly different shades. And as I get older, my eyes can't tell the difference. And so, like, I'm just like, did someone see me in that yesterday? And so, yeah. So I'm happy with the colors right now.
So yeah, nice summer blazer. One more fun question or fun fact, I guess. So I have heard, rumor has it, that you are a perpetual hobbyist.
Love my friends. And so I will adopt any hobby that my friends or family. The thing is I have the worst type of follow through where it's like episodic across time. And so like I started playing the guitar 20 years ago, and I'm like 10% better today because I pick it up like every 3 years. My daughter got obsessed with knitting, and like we used to sit down and do it, and she would just be mindlessly watching TV, and I'd be concentrating about like how you do it. So I like to try new things. I rarely master them, as my friends that play golf will tell you. But I like picking up new stuff to actually hang out with friends and family. I took up bridge last year, and it is still painful. So like.
I don't know. I took up golf like 18 years ago. It's still painful. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
And that's why I like golf, because like everyone's basically, and I told them like, every sport should have a handicap where like if you don't improve, you get a little bit of reward system over those that work hard. So,
think about it that way. That's a nice way to think about it. Okay, well, the topic, right? So cybersecurity, question for you. What do you think, is some of the most pressing threats for businesses as it relates to cybersecurity?
So it's interesting. It's like, what's the fact of the threat? And then what's the emotionality around it? So look, the biggest threat for businesses right now, I still think, is around what we call third-party risk in the industry. It is the fact that we're in one of the most interconnected environments, and there's no illusion that we actually have control over our thing. If you look today, like I'm taking a trip next week. to Dubai, and outside the U.S. People look at you sideways if you actually try to text them. They're like, "Why aren't you on WhatsApp?" And so I downloaded WhatsApp, and our security chief called, and he's just like, "Hey, didn't you read our advisory we put out? WhatsApp has a compromise on their Mac version." I'm like, "I didn't put it on my Mac version." He was just like, "Don't put it on your Mac version." But like, WhatsApp is used by everyone, and like, there's a vulnerable compromise that anyone can solve. So this notion that like we all have tens and hundreds and thousands of technologies, depending on the size of our companies and our environments, and like at any moment in time, those things could be not there. In addition to that, we're responsible to actually, what's the old saying, buyer beware? We're responsible for buying them, using them, securing them in the most effective way. That adds an incredible amount of management load that sometimes make people feel like it's just not possible.
Thank you. Be careful in Dubai.
Yeah, exactly. It is. Yeah.
Do you see any specific advantages from a knowledge and technical leadership standpoint about organizations in Greater Boston and Massachusetts leading the way in cybersecurity besides Rapid7, maybe?
Yeah, no, I actually think that outside of it, look, cybersecurity is, part of it is why I love it, is it is a complicated domain. And it's a complicated domain, and that means you actually do need expertise. Expertise matters. I also love the fact that, like, you do have, it's one of those few things, you do very much have good guys and bad guys, good ladies, bad ladies. You have that dynamic. Expertise matters, and Massachusetts has a wealth of expertise. You have it in established companies that have deep connections that actually been here helping their customers. So whether that's Comcast, Akamai, RSA was actually really focused right around the corner here, to a bunch of sort of like companies that came up in Rapid7, CyberArk, and a bunch of other companies. And now it's a thriving incubation hub in the startup community. Now we have to work every day to make sure we maintain that momentum, but every evolution of technology, Massachusetts and the greater Boston area has been a core player and leader in the overall market here. And that means we do have lots of expertise in the area. We do have lots of talent. We do have lots of perspective, and we do have lots of experience that people can rely on. People don't have to go far to actually get what they need to actually make sure that they're secure.
And then beyond our local community, what are some successful examples of cybersecurity efforts or cross-industry collaborations in this space?
Yeah, so if you can actually zoom out and you can think about um, industry and national partnerships, of which there's a bunch of threat sharing. Like, one of the most successful models of threat sharing, you start in the financial services industry, where you had this massive amount of in threat sharing. The way to think about it is when a bad thing happens to one organization, how fast do you share the information about what happened so that it doesn't happen in other organizations? It's just like, it's a basic thing. Attackers and criminals collaborate for success. One of the most fascinating things is that the model that you actually have in the criminal ecosystem is that they actually have a functional economy ecosystem where the person who actually compromises your machine they don't do anything with it. They take that capacity and they said, like, all right, do I want to sell that capacity to someone that's going to mine for Bitcoins? Or do I want to sell that access to someone that's going to actually infiltrate your company or your organization? There's different people that actually monetize exfiltration. Part of that is that they actually have a functional economy where different people play different roles. Likewise, to your point, there's been a slow but steady effort for people that are defending, for organizations, companies, nonprofit, to be able to do the same thing and actually get the benefit. So one is the information sharing agreements, which are a big deal for actually knowing what's happening where. Public-private partnerships extend. In Massachusetts here, we sponsored with some other companies the Cyber Trust Alliance, which was about how do companies come together to provide security for small municipalities and nonprofits. We also, like, you have partnerships like Rapid7 and Comcast have a partnership. And that's all about like how do you actually look at the massive company. The one thing, sorry for a brief aside, is there's this massive divide in the security between very large organizations that can afford the budget, the overhead, and everything else, And and I would just say even mid-sized organizations that do not have the resources or the capacity, and frankly can't even hire. Like, how do you actually, if a large organization has 1,000 IT people and therefore they can have 50 security people, if you have like a part-time IT person, or if you have 5 IT people or 10 IT, how are you going to do it? So there's this massive divide in terms of the accessibility of the knowledge and experience. So the partnership that we have aims at sort of like equalizing that. But you have so many different approaches to how do we actually partner to actually make it easier and easier for every organization to do it and to adapt it. I would say the biggest challenge in cybersecurity is how do we make it easier for people to have good cybersecurity and a budget they can afford.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, I think the partnership's been great for us, obviously, at Comcast Business with Rapid7. I think, and both of us serve organizations of all sizes. What do you see as some of the key differences maybe between the organizations that we would maybe say are high performing, cyber resilient versus those that just seem to be playing catch up often, besides the resource issue you just talked about?
Yeah, so I think that, beyond a certain point, it's not how much money you actually spend, it's how effective you are. So here's a couple observations. One, the people that do it take it seriously. And I'm careful about this. What I've observed is lots of organizations take cybersecurity seriously when they have to. So, when they're compromised, when their competitor compromised, or when there's some regulator that's actually doing it, that is just like deferring issues until like something bad and uncontrollable happen. So that's one approach, but that's always going to lead to issues. Organizations that do a really good job of cyber take it seriously, but they're not the ones that actually spend the most. They're the ones that actually do the fundamentals. And so the fundamentals are they make sure that their infrastructure is up to date, so they don't have massive amounts of technology debt. They make sure that they have good baseline configurations. By the way, these are things that are known and achievable and things that everyone is actually paid for. They minimize the vulnerability exposure. They make sure that someone, frequently not themselves, is monitoring their environment. And they actually have reasonable cyber insurance to actually make sure it's not. But it is the fundamentals. Most the research that you look at time and time again, it is the fundamentals that actually drive the likelihood of severe compromises. Let me say that again, is we're all going to have the thing that we actually talked about, where there's going to be mild things that actually happen time to time. It's the fundamentals that drive a high likelihood of severe compromise, where someone gets in and then they actually are in your environment for 100 days, and they actually compromise not one part of your environment, they compromise your whole environment. You've seen some of the news around this stuff. That is where there's not fundamentally good fundamentals in place.
That's great. And what are some common blind spots companies might face when they're trying to safeguard their digital infrastructure?
Yeah, and so I think that one of the top things when you think about things that are frequently ignored is, and it pains me to say this, by the way, because I'm a technology person through and through. But at the end of the day, cybersecurity is a people business. And like people ignore the people aspects of cybersecurity. And there's only so much technology you can actually do. Where look, we're curious. We do all the stuff. Jim's thing about the clicking. Everyone does it. Every organization does it. But how do you respond? How do you contact when something bad happens? The human response to say like, let me tell someone that something bad happened right now. So the training of the people and the engagement about both how to do it when bad things happen, how do we respond to those things that are happening? What are the daily practices that we use? We published it like it was like 5 years ago. Is we had someone that was rushing through, and they were actually trying to iterate something to do innovation for customers, and they put something on. They were collaborating with the customer, and they put it on a public sort of like thing. Now, it was a minor thing, but that practice was just a practice that was, I can't add tools enough to do that. And so, yes, we add more and more tools. But one of the things that's commonly missed in this, I would just say, rush to figure out like the overwhelmness of cyber is the people element and the people aspect, which ends up playing a multiplicative effect, not just on who clicks it, but how we respond.
Thank you. And then another question. What emerging technologies or trends in cybersecurity are most likely to reshape how businesses protect their operations, like in the future?
Well, I have not read the latest report. I heard it was great though. My team gave me an overview. So like if you
See if
think
nothing sticks.
exactly. So if you have some things to highlight, please let me know. So there's a couple trends. So one of them is that like 2 years ago, um, the training that we did for everyone everywhere was if you went through our cybersecurity training, you would watch this video. One of the things I did is I made videos fun again because our training videos were so dull. And like, it's like
Did you wear a colored blazer in those videos?
absolutely, that's the
Okay,
key to it,
yeah,
right?
okay.
But you would go through these videos and they would train people, and the number one thing they would actually say is just like, watch out for word misspelling issues, for these types of things. Exactly. Guess what? None of those issues that we were just warning people about before happen today. Why do they not happen today? Because every attacker has a common enough sense to actually use AI to write their things and to target their things and the microfiche. So one of the bigger trends is that like it is harder and harder to discern what's real and what's not real because it's pretty good. Because like, I can go to anyone here's LinkedIn page and say craft a note based on this person's both page, their public speak, and their social media that's likely to do it. You know how I know this works? Salespeople do it themselves. I like get a sales email, and I'm just like, that's pretty good.
Do you send it to your sales team? That's what I do.
I'm like, why can't you guys do something that's good? And it's so like, uh, but like it is easier than ever to capture your attention. And let's just face it, our attention is kind of for sale. We like to be distracted more and more today. So I would say it's one of the trends is attackers are having an easier time than ever about capturing attention and then how they pivot that attention to then actually infiltrate and compromise environments. That's one of many ways that they're using AI and technology trends. But I'll just say AI, both on the positive side and the negative side. So I'll just say that AI is one of the biggest trends that's actually happening in cyber, but I would not lose track of the fact that like attacks are becoming much more personalized and much more specific to you, and much more attractive to you. It is not generic anymore. And by the way, they're multimodal, and so like we're not getting the notes about the prince in Africa anymore. We're getting phone calls with the voice of our son or daughter that are actually saying like, Mom, Dad, I need money. I'm at this thing right now. Can you Venmo or wire me? And it sounds exactly like them. And so those are the ones that actually affect sort of like individuals, but those things then do scale up to actually how they affect companies and organizations.
Thank you. I know my kids keep warning me about that, about, the fake me that might show up or something like that. Yeah.
It is a
gives me pause.
the ability to be able to manipulate video, voice, the email tonality. It's a big deal. It's one of my bigger worries, not just in the political sphere, where like how does anyone know it's real anymore, but also in the deeply personal sphere, especially if you see the amount of attacks that are happening against older people around the world.
Thanks, Corey. So at Rapid7, you've spoken about the need for more collaboration across industries and with the public sector, government. Can you give us an example, maybe where you think that collaboration has worked and maybe then where we're still falling a little short?
Yeah, so one of the areas that we focused on is collaborating with the government, and we're talking about public-private partnerships, but collaborating with the government on how do we actually think about vulnerability risk of technology systems. Now, I will say that we worked together with both the first Trump administration and the Biden administration. So it was both. It's less of a focus right now. I think the new administration is trying to get its footing on cyber. So we heard that there's going to be some upcoming engagement there. So I just think it's coming down the pipeline there. But the reason that that's important is we're probably in one of the bigger innovation booms that we've seen in a while. We go through these cycles on innovation booms. We're on a massive innovation boom. Like the AI thing is, while some of it lots of it's real, and like it is changing how people approach, how they develop, the capital being deployed. And so how we think about what are baseline standards that should be applied and what should be the security of our infrastructure, and how do we report on things like vulnerabilities? How do we actually standardize that? That has been a massive effort. And I would just say by and large, that's successful across multiple administrations, and many of those practices have been adapted, standardized, and continued. Some of them have been picked up by NIST and others. We've continued to enhance the National Vulnerability Database. We've done working cars. All of that is extraordinarily positive. The flip side of what hasn't worked is really in two dimensions. Is one, we do not have a model in the U.S., and I'll center this on the U.S., a functional model in the U.S. to say, how do we actually tackle baseline security standards and levels for organizations that are not large or heavily regulated organizations. So we have a bunch of municipalities, a bunch of schools, a bunch of hospitals, a bunch of nonprofits that are below what we think about like the security line. And we haven't figured out a good model for thinking about how we think about those. The second thing that actually hasn't worked is that, Jim can call me. You have plenty of people you can actually contact. What happens when there's a sexploitation thing, when a 12-year-old gets blackmailed? Who do they call? What are the local police going to do? Like, so we have like as cybercrime increases and it affects young people and old people especially, which are really the targets of these things, we do not have a functional policing infrastructure that's equipped to really tackle those issues and those things. So that's one that as society we have to figure out that over time because we should protect the vulnerable. And we have policing for crimes in lots of other areas. And by the way, this is not a knock on the police. It's just not an equipped thing.
It hasn't evolved
It
yet.
just hasn't evolved.
Yeah, it's a gap. Okay. So together we partner, as we talked about, to keep businesses connected, keep them resilient, obviously leveraging Rapid7 to detect and respond to threats. What do you see as some of the biggest gaps between security and connectivity that these business leaders need to bridge?
Yeah, so this is, what's interesting is I talked about we're in one of the bigger innovation booms. The corollary of the innovation boom, and to have innovation, you must be connected. Like it's just not possible to have innovation without connectivity. Like it just doesn't, like we're in a more and more connected world. Any of the stuff, whether you look at Claude, Chat, GPT, Gemini, it requires you to actually be connected online. And when you're connected, you can do amazing things, but you have to be connected. You have to be connected and you actually have to be open to actually not just what you control, but leveraging other people's services. If you want to be an innovative visionary, you also have to be dependent on a complicated and even complex technology ecosystem. Now, the challenge with that, and we've seen this at every point throughout history, is the faster you innovate, the more likely you are to innovate less securely. I'll just say that again. The faster you innovate, it's a corollary that like innovation and security gaps are closely tied together. And so what I think we're trying to do in this, by the way, we know this. Lots of people know this. What's interesting is that there's probably more focus on security at this phase of innovation than we actually have before. But we have to make that a reality that we're attempting to secure as we innovate. Part of the partnership that we actually have is we're trying to provide a framework for organizations as they actually connect in and as they adopt and as they innovate and as they sort of like leverage more and more services is how do they actually have someone watching their back? You have a large organization of people that's what they do in their security operations centers and data center. We provide some of the technology, but most organizations don't have enough people to do the innovation. And they definitely don't have enough people as they're innovating to actually watch their back and they're innovating. That's the core focus of like, how do we actually do that and how do we scale that and how do we make that economical?
Are you tired yet? Are you tired of my questions yet?
I would ask you some questions.
Oh, boy.
Exactly.
I don't know if that's in the agenda.
Exactly.
Just kidding. So here's a question for you. How can non-technical leaders who are new to AI ask the right questions to make sure they are holding their organizations accountable for security?
Oh, I love this. So the number one thing, if you're a non-technical leader, is you have to let go of the fact that like you are going to look bad by asking questions about things you don't understand. I would just say, and I think that's true in everything. I have been in technology my entire career, and I spend a significant amount of time every day saying like, explain that to me again slower. And it's like, and I understand a lot, but I'm like, explain it to me slower. Now, there's two things that happen when I actually have someone repeat it and explain it to me slower. One of them is that I actually make them go to I understand it, and it takes some at bats, and I may ask the same thing in meetings, but I actually get to understand it. The other thing is when they have to repeat it slower and go into more detail, I get to see what's BS. Because sometimes in this world where like it's a bunch of AI hype, is some people are selling you stuff on a surface level and it doesn't stand the test of scrutiny. And like, so you just have to be willing to actually be vulnerable enough to actually be like, explain that to me. Take another dimension, like go in, drill into that. Give me an analogy or an example. But like, it sounds like you have to do the same
You
thing.
just got to be not afraid, I think, right? To say I didn't understand it. One of the things I love to say to some of my engineers, they don't really love it, but I love it. I say, explain it like you would explain it to your mother. How would you explain it to your mom? What? My mom doesn't know what I do. Like, I know. How would you explain that concept to her? You know?
I tell them this is a dry run, so you can have something to talk about at Thanksgiving. And so like,
Like, no, it's good. Okay. Across categories, businesses, consumers, and the general public are hearing about security breaches every day. We heard about Jim's, we heard about my daughter's. You can read about 34 billion of them in the brief. But as this trend continues, what role does cybersecurity play in maintaining customer trust and brand reputation for businesses?
it's a great question. In fact, one of the more disheartening things is I heard a CFO say once, well, if it's going to happen anyway, why don't I just pay the fines and get cyber insurance, pay the fines, and deal with it after the fact? And so like he wasn't serious, but he's just like, what's the point of actually doing it? So the number one thing, it's like anything else, is that whether you are a consumer or whether you are a regulator, if you want to do business with someone, you actually care whether they even put in a good faith effort to actually try. Like people do recognize negligence. People do recognize where you actually didn't even attempt or you acted in bad faith to actually do the thing. So like the how you actually manage matters to your customers and it matters to your regulators. And the thing is, while it's true that like every single organization in the world will be compromised, the details, as you have in your report, and other things will come out about what you did before, during, and after that compromise. And like all things, how you show up and how you showed up matters. So that's the first one. The second thing that I think is incredibly important as people actually process, um, it is not just how you show up when these things, when these things happen. It is also about, trying to figure out the right words here. It is also about the tone that you're actually setting, about what's important and what's valuable across the organization. Because for organizations that actually set a tone um, that do not take good care of their customers' data, that their customers' information, the other stuff like that. That is not just a leadership thing. That percolates down throughout the organization, and you're inviting a bunch of other issues that actually come up along the way with that mindset.
Thank you. And you kind of covered this one, but maybe see what else you want to do to expand. But how can organizations balance the need for rapid innovation with the imperative to maintain strong security and customer trust?
Yes, I think this is one of the hardest ones, especially when you're in the cycle right now. Here's I'll share I'll share the approach that we take around innovation because we have teams that are shifting to both building AI technologies, leveraging AI technologies, and there's definitely risk when you're actually doing the innovation. So the first thing is you have to be in the game. You have to be trying, and you have to take the at bats. We now put in the last year we've shifted to putting most of our releases now in early releases where we say like here's the early release. Google did this quite well for a number of years. They lots of time didn't actually ever release anything, but they actually did quite well at this for a number of years. We put them in early release, and then we're very transparent about what the status, what the state, and how people's data and how people's information is actually used. Transparency and clarity does matter. So, like the notion that we are actually innovating, this is an early release. Here's what it means. Here's how we communicate. It allows customers to actually make choice. Now, we're lucky because customers want to consume. They're pushing us to consume. But, I also have had calls from customers. It's like, hey, Corey, I got a bunch of policy standards. Like, hey, I need not to adopt that early release. In fact, like, I know my engineers on my team love that thing. You need to shut it off so they can't access it. And that's a great thing too. Like that is a great thing too. So I think as we're innovating, I think the tendency, and this may be more I'm trying not to be too regionally elitist. This may be more New England than California. But like, I think one of the things we get is that we get to over deliver and under promise, which is not what you find in the hype world of AI. I'll say that again. In this area, we get to over deliver and under promise. I think that is valued and recognized over time versus people that go out and promise the sky, disappoint on the core experience, and do a rush job. And it's something that we have to stay vigilant on. I have people on my team every day that actually like we're fighting the fight about like how fast do we actually go. I'll tell you, there's absolutely times because I just went through the retrospective, like, nope, we went too fast there. Like we have to slow that down. Um, but you have to be in the game, you have to be doing the innovation, and then you have to pick your speed, your pace, and you got to adjust the throttle. But most importantly, you have to engage transparently.
Thank you. How can a business measure the effectiveness and success of their cybersecurity program, besides the obvious one?
I encourage people to actually use standards. Now, their standards in cybersecurity are not as mature as the standards in financial markets. So I'll just say that. Um, but we do have them. And in fact, at Rapid7, we're reorienting with both us and our partners around sort of like make it really easy and transparent standards. So there is in the US, there's something called a NIST standard about like how you look at your cybersecurity governance. People should apply it. They should get assessments on it. They should look at the SOC. Some of you look at things like SOC 2. But there are standards, and we should always just start with the baseline. What are the standards? We like some standards from Gartner. We like standards from MITRE, which is right around the corner. By the way, I left that off. You talk about public-private partnerships. It's one of the leading public-private partnerships that's based out of Massachusetts. But I think that like if you're trying to figure out how to measure it, I would start with the standards. And the whatever regions you're actually in, I would just say the government's, the U.S. Department of Commerce NIST standard is an excellent place to actually start whenever you actually look at stuff. When you think about like monitoring your environment, there's a whole bunch of measures, but we know these things cold. And I would just say I would just start with the basics and go from there.
Thank you. Given the unique considerations of small businesses, we talked about this a little bit earlier, how should those organizations approach cybersecurity? Can small businesses tap into larger networks or resources to improve their security?
I think small businesses have to partner and they have to outsource more of the security. Now, I can be, because I'm in the business of outsourcing there, so I'll just be transparent about that too. But like, it doesn't have to be Rapid7. It doesn't have to be Comcast. It doesn't, but like, you have to actually do it in scale. And the worst thing I see in small businesses is when they actually dump too much on one or two people. It's just, it's setting up to fail, but also as a human, it's just unfair. Like setting someone up to fail is just not a good dynamic. So however you do it, I think if you're a small business, if you're a medium, like find the partnerships that are going to help you get the scale and provide the experience that you actually need. Because otherwise you are asking your one or two less than 5-person team to do way too much without enough training, enough skill, enough experience.
Trusted partners. I think that's really, really the key. Thank you. Final question, maybe. Help us predict the future. What does cybersecurity landscape look like in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think cybersecurity is on the early curve of AI adoption. And I think that there is a real potential for us to tackle one of the most meaningful problems in cybersecurity. So we have, I would just say, two of the most meaningful problems in cybersecurity. The first meaningful problem in cybersecurity is we produce a bunch of buggy, crappy code that is easy to compromise and exploit. We just do. The world produces, like, it starts at the fact that we just produce software that has far too many security vulnerabilities that are in there. And then the technology that we built is too tricky to actually have a good secure configuration that does the job. It's just too many choices to actually make for the thing. That there's a pretty good chance that we can actually materially curtail that in the next 5 years. Because as we're partnering with AI on code generation and writing, the ability to actually ensure that we actually minimize and when we have it track and auto update those security vulnerabilities should go up a significant margin. So that's an incredibly big deal. The second thing is we have a massive talent shortage, which, by the way, I think the state of Massachusetts has been leading the way in producing cybersecurity professionals, but there's still a global talent shortage to service, maintain, configure, upgrade, monitor environments. And so even in the partner model that we recommend, capacity comes up there. The ability to automate more and more things, I think that cybersecurity may be probably one of the few domains where you can have a good balance between um, the workforce experience, where you can actually have still more jobs in the workforce, more satisfied people because they don't feel like they're set up to fail. Um, and you can actually address the gap in the cyber shortage because we're leveraging AI to automate more of it. Those are two of the biggest deals that I think. And I think cybersecurity is probably one of the few fields where it doesn't necessarily have to have the people disruption that I worry about so much when it comes to other parts of AI, because it's the largest probably disruptive white collar jobs that we've seen in a long time. Okay, thank you.
We need, I don't have no time to do some questions. Okay, great. Let's do some questions.
One that's in the chat online. You talked about the human side of all of this. How do you best manage human side of security with almost everyone using the same type of AI tools?
Oh, that's so I'm interpreting that as the fact that humans are using the same AI tools, therefore they all have the same risk, frankly, from how they use the AI tools, but as well as the tools themselves. So one, the third-party risk is a tool for AI, is just like any other risk in the environment. So I completely agree with that. And that is just every tool you use, you have to at least ask the question about like, how do I use it securely? And how do I use it well? Or have a partner that actually does that for you. Now, the other part of the equation, though, is how do you protect your data and how do you protect your information as your employees are actually using the AI tools and all the other things there. And for that, I think data governance is probably one of the, you asked earlier what's changing. I would just say the data governance domain is probably one of the fastest increasing domains, definitely in large companies, and it'll probably come to like smaller and medium-sized companies pretty soon.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would just add on there, for our company, employee training is critical. Training them on tools. You want to enable the use of AI to improve their workday, to improve how they care for customers, but you want to be very careful about data that's put in there and, how it's used and whether or not that's an AI tool that protects the data, of the company or their access to third-party tools where maybe it's not protected. And I think in a lot of ways, you want to lean on the employees, you want to train them really well and lean on them where they know the risks.
Exactly. And I would say limit access to things where the data governance is not in place. Like our employees can use AI, but they can only use it in certain tools.
Hi, my question is about ransomware attacks. So as you may know, FBI on annually publishes also a very interesting report called IC3, which highlights the trends in cybersecurity. One of them that has been, going up, uptrend is ransomware, consistently in the last almost double, like a Moore's law or something, and this trend has been going up. And what do you think are the ways we're gonna tackle this challenge? Is there a role for AI as a tool to deal with ransomware related attacks where the hacker breaks in, compromises, and actually locks your resource and asks for ransomware? So what is the role of AI, if there's any? Thank you.
Yeah, there's been several innovations in ransomware attacks across, and we've applied a number of these. So one, it's easier than ever to actually roll back to backups and systems and other things like that. So you've seen massive innovations in the what we consider the backup industry about the ability to identify. There's also been significant increases in the ability to detect ransomware attacks. And also even to detect them. There's an innovative company in town here that's in the same building I'm in that does how do you identify when your backup has been compromised? So like and so like you've seen massive innovation in the ability to both detect, roll back, and stop ransomware attacks, whether it's in backups, whether it's in memory on machines. We acquired a company that did Minerva that did this sort of like in-memory ransomware detection and roll back and backup. And yet attackers keep moving. So part of the reason, I would just say ransomware is the dominant sort of like payload of how people get to monetization. But you and I are talking about like cases where people leverage ransomware attacks to lock down your system and lock down critical systems. One of the leading emerging trends right now is I actually don't lock down your system. I get into your system and say, if you don't stop right now, I will cripple your system. So now they're using the fragility of interconnected systems to say, I'm not going to tell you where I am in your environment, but what I'll tell you is this, and if you don't do it, I will break your system. So, and by the way, once it's actually broken, it's actually takes, we have a customer that actually called us after the fact, but it took them weeks to actually rebuild the system. Now, they actually broke a small piece of the environment that everything else in the environment was relying on. But it was not a traditional ransomware attack that was about like, standard ransomware attack is, you have data stored on your device. I'm going to go encrypt that data on your device, and therefore you can't actually get access to it unless I give you the unencryption key. And so the way to think about ransomware is I would actually just change it a little bit, which is why I don't even put it in the traditional category anymore. I would think about ransomware is just an evolution of like, what is it that hackers believe will make you and your insurer write a check. And whatever that is, they're going to keep modifying their behaviors to actually get that to happen. If backups aren't working, they'll move over to something else. But that's the trend. So there's been massive innovation. Yes, AI is helping. But the thing that I'm pointing out is that like ransomware has moved up the curve. And what today's ransomware is not the ransomware of even 3 years ago. Yeah, so AI is helping in two ways for your transition. One is helping on detection and looking at it. Two, it's actually helping on the monitoring of like when people are attempting to encrypt devices. So that's why I said that was an incredibly innovative company to look at like how do you actually monitor real time when encryption is attempted, and especially when people are trying to contaminate backups. And how do you actually detect and stop that real time? But it's also used on the preventative side to actually block a bunch of attacks. So like, how do you actually detect the act of attempted encryption? And so our ability to actually stop traditional ransomware attacks is actually going up quite now. I will say that not all of that is new AI, which is the large language models. Lots of that is just traditional machine learning. And look, I have, as a brief aside, I am indifferent about whether we're doing automation, machine learning, or large language models. It's always solving the problem in the job. But our capacity to do lots of that stuff is actually growing exponentially day by day. But the attackers are evolving every day too.
So I want to go back to something you said earlier about how when we innovate faster, we actually bring in more vulnerabilities into the system. So I'm thinking about the latest release of Sora 2 and how it was clearly trained on a lot of copyrighted material, and people were automatically introducing all these new videos that then like literally in hours, Sam came back. I was like, well, we can't do that. And we're going to have to think about the copywriting policies, whatever. It's like, so how do you, I guess, slow things down or from actually, let me flip it from a user perspective, like how do you approach these new technologies when they're just released?
So I will just say, and this is probably a more of a historical perspective, is I think we should be cautious, but not necessarily slow down. I think we have to get it right in the time frame because you're not going to know what the issues are, but you have to address them when you get them. This is the right point to address copyright issues. I don't know if there was anything that we could have done differently that would have actually pre-addressed copyright issues. But like you have to address the right issues at the right time, and that's in some ways that's a bit of a callous thing. But like if you look at the history of change and innovation, is the ones that are done well, people address the serious issues and didn't let them pile up over time. Um, but it's also just as bad when people try to over forecast every single issue, because then you actually don't actually get to what they are. Sometimes you have to explore and experiment to actually get to the issue. So that's one thing. It's just like you have to address it at the right point in time. How I actually think about leveraging technology is, for me, I think this is true for our company too, definitely, is we assign people at our company that are actually to play around with it, but in non-serious ways, meaning that like we don't put customer data in and we say like what's the potential and what's possible there. Like no customer data, no customer facing stuff. There's a whole bunch of stuff that like we play around with. Like I'm piloting like 3 things right now. And but like the first one that I piloted for a while, I hooked it up to a Gmail account that I created from scratch. Because I'm like, I don't know this could go sideways. Like, I don't really want to actually have access to my whole like inbox and everything else like that. But I want to see what was happening with one of these newfangled AI assistant type things. So there's ways to actually see what it is, to look at it and let it mature. And some of these things you have to let mature. Like you can go see what the security, by the way, if someone on their webpage does not talk about what the security of the thing that they're actually doing is, you can be pretty sure they don't have any security around the thing that they're actually talking about. And so, but it's actually good. Like we're encouraging our employees to actually play around in safe ways, and you can absolutely do it. Just no customer data. And then it's always like, okay, if this got compromised, what would happen? It's kind of the thing, way to think about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi. So I guess my question is around I've been a practitioner in cybersecurity for many years in large organization, and what we usually see, it's like the reactionary mode of cybersecurity, right? Because Rapid7, vulnerability, I will scan, I'll find the vulnerability, then send somebody to patch it. App security, same thing. How do you see like any opportunity to kind of move the organization more to a greenfield environment where actually you become more proactive, especially with using AI? Even AI actually have some basic issues because a lot of companies just laying AI or the word AI on top of the traditional software that they have, and it's not really, adjust with what we have today.
AI garbage out there that people are actually appending or prepending, what's that the right word for it? AI to it. And so I would just look, I would take everything with a grain of salt. You have to dig in and see if it's actually really there. That's why I said like there's real values for being deeply inquisitive about what's happening. To your point is I actually do think, and I actually went into it a little bit, but like I actually think there's a massive opportunity to actually get out in front of it. So if you just think about, and then I'll give you a conference. It's like, if you think about the code that your company writes, it should be written more securely with AI. Like it should actually catch it in line. So instead of you doing like a code scanning thing and going after the fact, like it actually should over the next couple of years actually catch more stuff, be more interactive, give you feedback as you're actually coding and solving as you're outsourcing. That should actually be doing. I know of several startups in the world of actually deploying technology that are actually building essentially AI deployment and configuration management systems, where it deploys it into a target safe state. Now, it's very early. We'll see how that progresses and what's happening there. But the ability to actually do that sooner is actually, I would say, is one of the positive outcomes that I expect. Now, let me give you the counter to it. The counter to it is if you're a software developer today, by the way, and you're graduating, you're kind of freaked out because it's a really tough market because all of a sudden, like you entered college and you were like, I did the smartest thing in the world. Like I'm going to be a software engineer. You graduated college this year. You're actually hunting for a job. It is a hard market. It's a stressful time for us. The reason I bring this up to your point though, is that I and like she is a smart young lady. But I was talking to my 13-year-old niece, and she's just like, I got to show you something. She's written her own productivity app using AI because she is not like any of the task management systems that she actually found online. It's not bad. But everyone's a developer now. And so what you're seeing is everyone can develop, everyone can script, everyone can analyze, and democratization has many positive benefits. They rarely have been good for security. And so that's the one thing of like, because like someone does that, but then like, is someone ever going to go back in and update that application? Are they going to think about how they maintain it? And the answer is probably not. So we are getting ready to actually have a new vulnerability surface outside the professional class. Right as the professional class is actually likely to improve, we're going to have a bunch of actually user-driven applications that are going to come online that no one's ever going to think about, like, should I update that? Should I actually go in and look at that? And that's going to raise all types of other questions. So I'm very optimistic on the first part of it, but there's a tail to this that actually is, I think, going to be problematic.
Okay, so I'm going to, in the last few minutes, take the privilege of the final question. And maybe Sean, you can add to this as well. One of the things we think about here at the Chamber is the degree to which government gets involved in regulating all of this innovation and this type of activity. Here in Massachusetts, there's a piece of data privacy legislation that's pending up the State House. And as we're talking here today, there's about 1,000 pieces of legislation at the local and state levels around the country to attempt to regulate AI in some way. It's not that we don't want some form of appropriate sort of regulation and guardrails, but what is the appropriate way for government to approach the uncertainties and the concerns of society with respect to AI and cybersecurity at the local, state, and federal levels?
Well said. Okay, so the first thing is we have to start by acknowledging that government has a vested interest in protecting its citizens. And I actually think that's a valid and vested interest. Um, and government also has, I think, a valid investor's interest in having a healthy ecosystem where people can work, be employed, they have freedom to actually sort of like build, innovate, and do other things. That's part of like the American way. That's part of how we are. So the question is, it is a question of balance. And so like anything that says like, I would say I'm a capitalist, but like I realize that basically unregulated capitalism is not a fun world to live in. But is an overregulated sort of like thing is probably a low growth, low employment place too. So we have to actually realize that like it is a task of striking the right balance. So then let's go through like what's essential. The best way to do it in things that are actually national and global is to have clear federal standards, like hands down by far, like having piecemeal standards across states only does one thing and one thing only. It actually, by the way, at the stage that we're at right now, Rapid7 can deal with it. It actually destroys the entrepreneur. It destroys the innovator because they're the ones that actually are not able to operate, able to innovate, able to craft new things because the complexity of doing this across trying to figure out how to actually take something, build it and sell it and have it applied across sort of like all 50 states is onerous, difficult, challenging. So it punishes the innovators, the startups, the small businesses, even though much of it is targeted at the larger organization, that's what ultimately punishes. It's a tax on the larger organizations, but it actually punishes the smaller ones. That's not the goal ecosystem. So one, the federal standard is the number one thing. The second thing is states have to stop the insane competition of trying to actually show who's the best regulator in the world. There's nothing more destructive. And look, I love this state. I love Massachusetts. We do not need to actually be an innovator on proving that we are the most regulated state. That is a strategy of law. And that's not what they're trying to do. I'm not saying that's what they're trying to do, but you do actually get a hint of some of the one-upsmanship across this thing. And that actually, did she say it publicly? I'm trying to figure out like I think it was said publicly, so I want to attribute it. But one of one of our national security advisors once asked, why we did not have a like a merchant marine to actually go attack China, Russia, and others with cybersecurity. So like this hackback and all this other stuff. And their response was people that live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Like we should not act against our own interests, meaning that we are one of the biggest technology adopters in the world. We don't want people actually doing random disruption. And in likewise, Massachusetts is an innovation economy. Like, why would we actually like want to lead in stifling innovation? So I know that was a passionate response, but
Yeah, it was. It was great. Well, Sean, do you want to
I
add
think,
anything?
well, I also think organizations, honestly, like the chambers, you know, I know you're the chair of all the chambers for the United States. And
Yeah.
met with all, met with all of them in addition to the Greater Boston, but you know, the public policy groups that organize there, just like the business, you know, that bring the business community together. So it's more of a private-public partnership. I feel like that's really important. I mean, I feel like when I've seen good legislation around emerging technologies happen, it's been when the public policy groups like that are, you know, involved with businesses kind of bring forward, you know, those ideas, those issues. I think that's important too.
Great. Well, this was a fascinating conversation. I have many takeaways. I will say, though, that as a non-technical person, I crossed the threshold of admitting that I don't know a long time ago, and it's very relieving. It's very freeing to say I don't know what you're talking about. Or explain that to me. But you know, many takeaways, a lot of good advice, a lot of good insights. So thank you for taking both Sean, Corey. Thank you for taking the time. Please join me in thanking our guests. And thank you all for being here today and to learn about future chamber events. If this is your first one, bostonchamber.com is the place to look, and look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.